What If is the latest Marvel Studios series to hit Disney Plus and their first ever animated production. It features the voices of more than 50 MCU cast members who reprise their roles from the films. Before we get into this, don't forget to hit that like button down below. It does wonders in getting my content out there, and if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to keep up to date with all my content. Marvel Studios' What If flips the script on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, offering an anthology of stories reimagining famous events from the films in unexpected ways. Creating a multiverse of infinite possibilities, What If features fan-favourite characters in wildly unique adventures, as the Watcher introduces us each week to alternate storylines that bounce around genres and tone. In this first episode, we're asked the question, what if Peggy Carter was given the Super Soldier Serum instead of Steve Rogers and became Captain Carter? Okay, so this is the first in a series of breakdown reviews I'm going to be doing for the Marvel Studios What If series. I've been saying this is such a great little anthology series that each and every episode is really its own different thing, and each individual story deserves to be really delved into in its own review. These are going to be spoiler breakdown reviews, so if you haven't watched the episode, I do suggest you go and watch that first before you watch this. Now, I'm going to be doing these reviews a little bit differently to normal. I'm just going to sit here and talk my thoughts on everything. This is a very cool episode. Of course, Hayley Atwell is back to voice the character of Peggy Carter. She has been in the MCU almost from the very beginning. The character and Hayley Atwell herself are favourites of MCU fans, and it's always so wonderful when she gets to come back and grace the screen, even if it is just in voice. She's just got such a charm to her that really lights up the screen whenever she's there, and it is just so nice to get a little spark of her every now and then. Other voice actors that have returned for this episode to reprise their characters from the MCU include Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes, Stanley Tucci as Dr. Erskine, Toby Jones as Arnim Zola, Dominic Cooper as Howard Stark, and Bradley Whitford, who reprises his role of Agent Flynn from the one-shot Agent Carter short film, which is a very exciting inclusion in this one as well, because it's the only other time he's kind of appeared in the MCU. So we're really bringing in people from kind of all the reaches of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think it's fantastic. The only real major glaring omission from this is that Chris Evans has not returned to voice Steve Rogers in this episode for one reason or another. I know a lot of the bigger talent from the Marvel movies, I'm talking Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr., Scarlett Johansson, haven't returned to the series. They're really only the three huge ones that haven't returned to their characters. A couple of the smaller characters are voiced by impressionists as well, but I don't think it's a huge issue here. I'm not too sure who is voicing Steve Rogers in this episode because I wasn't able to see the credits, but he does a very good job at doing it. And I do say it's glaringly obvious. He does a good impression, a good impersonation. It's not horrible. It doesn't really pull you out of the piece, but when you put someone who is impersonating an A-list actor up against all the other A-list actors who have actually returned to voice their characters, it is a little bit glaring. So of course this episode is an alternate take on Captain America the First Avenger, where Peggy Carter essentially becomes the figurehead for the US military instead of Steve Rogers. Peggy takes on the role of Captain Carter, who is a really, really awesome character who I'd really love to see some more of. And Steve Rogers is in here. He does become a hero, but kind of a different one. Howard Stark, of course, builds what is essentially an Iron Man armor for him. Essentially, it's kind of reminiscent to the Mark I that Tony Stark builds in the actual timeline of the MCU. He's given what's called the Hydra Stomper, and he gets to go inside this armor, essentially fly around like Iron Man and shoot, you know, photon blasts at people and fly around in a jetpack and all this great stuff. It's a really, really fun take on this movie, and I feel like more than any of the other episodes I've seen so far, this one really does try to stick to that storytelling from First Avenger. Some of the other episodes that I've seen so far, they kind of plant this seed and then they take off in a completely different direction. This one, it's almost a beat-for-beat retelling of the First Avenger, but it places Peggy Carter's Captain Carter in the role of Captain America. I think it's really cool. We get to revisit some of the really great sequences from the movie, like the prison breakout breakout scene where she goes in and she breaks out the Howling Commandos, including Bucky Barnes and that whole team. We've got the train takeover scene with the taking over the Hydra train, and we've got so many other great little moments in here. Battle against the Red Skull. You know, Peggy Carter gets the serum instead of Steve Rogers. There's a really great alternate take on that as well. And I think from the get-go, this is a really great episode to kind of introduce us to this idea of what if really is. I feel like if you'd taken one of the more obscure episodes where you plant a seed and then you take off in a different direction, the more general audience probably wouldn't understand what this series is all about. But giving us such a familiar movie that we have all seen multiple times, and I feel like the general audience, general fans of these series, have maybe seen multiple times or at least are familiar with, taking that and essentially just doing a completely different riff on that same story beat by beat with a different character is a really great way to introduce us into this series. And I've always been really fascinated with this idea of like the female variant of Captain America, and to bring that into the MCU is so great. And this series just, as I said in my main review, my kind of main overview review of the entire series, is that this is really giving us a chance to dive into some great stuff that we definitely never would have been able to this extent anyway, in the live action stuff. So the Disney Plus series, again, the whole concept of Marvel being able to create content for Disney Plus once again continues to show us the experimentation that Marvel is able to do. They're not blocked in by those, 2 hours that we're given, maybe 3 blocks of 2 hours of story that we're given every single year. Now we're getting hours and hours and hours of content, and it gives the studio more chance to kind of experiment and give us stuff we never would have without this possibility. This is a really action-heavy episode as well. Not all of the other episodes are so action-oriented, and I feel like it really does stick to that real style and tone of Captain America: The First Avenger. It's not one of my favorite Marvel movies. I love it. I think it's a great film, but it's maybe like a middle-rung movie to me because it does, I guess in comparison to everything that's come after, it feels like such a safe film. And in turn, I feel like this episode feels like such a safe episode as well. So it does feel kind of maybe a little, I'm not going to use the word generic, but I feel like it might just, again, but safe is probably the best word to use. I've already said that. But I feel like it very much does latch onto that style, and it does feel like a great war, action, drama kind of thing, and it really matches that style of the movie perfectly. I think that's really great, what this series is doing really greatly. I mean, they've been advertising this series as each episode is going to have a different genre, it's going to have a different style, it's going to have a different tone. The movies have been doing that for 12 or 13 years now. And really, this series is just kind of following in that footsteps. And it's going, okay, well, what kind of mold was this movie made in? This episode really needs to match that beautifully. And Captain Carter, this variant that we're getting in this episode right here, really does feel like something that is just so organic from the live action movies. And I think that is really great. At that, though, I do love the fact that this introduces other new concepts. And over the last few weeks leading up to this premiere, they've been making a big deal over the Hydra Stomper. I feel like that is something that obviously wasn't in the original movie. So that is the result of them going, okay, so what different direction can we take this movie? What can we do differently? And I think it's a really cool character. I think it's great to see Steve Rogers flying around as Iron Man. I really want to see what the ramifications of this would have been in this timeline down in the future for Tony Stark, where, of course, Howard Stark has developed essentially the first mark of an Iron Man outfit. So what would Tony Stark have done? He's the one who developed that. He's the one who created that. So even though these episodes are so great at like 30 minutes, they feel like it's just enough. It's not too short. It's not too long. It's just the perfect amount. Some of these episodes end and you're like, I'd love to see where the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe could go after this. And I think that's a really cool thing that's come out of this here. And the imagination that comes out of it, not only from those artists, but to you as a viewer, I mean, you can fill in these gaps yourself and kind of go off on a wild tangent in your own mind about, oh, what would have changed? What would have happened to the MCU if this was something that happened, if this was the main timeline? I love it. I think it's great. I think it feels like such an interactive thing almost. And like, if we disconnect this from like a timeline narrative kind of point of view, maybe we look at this as like from a filmmaking point of view, it's also really interesting to kind of have a look at like an alternate version of the movie. Not so much just going like, oh, this is an alternate version of the MCU timeline. This is like an alternate version of this film that we have lived with for like 10 years. It's almost like, well, this is the movie that we could have got if they made different creative decisions from the beginning. I like that idea. There's just something about that that just feels really fun. Now, I was a little bit hesitant going into this show because I wasn't too sure how it was going to work out. And I feel like maybe after watching this episode, people might still be a little bit hesitant because it is, I feel like, again, I've only seen 3, but out of the 3 that I have seen, this might be the safest of the bunch. Plain and simply because, even though I think it's a great idea just to retrudge this story and place a different character in the role, it does feel very safe. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of experimentation being done here. There's not a lot of risks being taken. But again, I understand why they did this, and I've just laid out all those reasons here. But I feel like if you're just someone who's coming into this with a little bit of hesitation, you've only got this one episode to watch, I feel like you might still have a bit of that hesitation at the end, feeling, I'm not too sure how this is going to retain itself as an entire series. Maybe you don't quite know how you're going to feel like it as the series goes along, but I do promise you, this series does get better. The episodes get better as they go along. Each episode is vastly different from the last and really puts different spins on different things, and it's like, stick with this thing. Really stick with it. And at that, I will be giving this episode of Marvel Studios' What If a 3 out of 5. Once again, I will be covering the individual What If episodes week by week. I'll be uploading these spoiler review breakdown videos just after the episode has debuted on Disney+, so it's ready for you there once you get out of the episode. Thanks again to the incredible team over at Disney+ for providing me with the first 3 episodes of this series for the purposes of my video coverage on my channel right here. And thanks to everybody out there for watching. I hope I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy. Hey everyone, if you haven't yet, smash that big old subscribe button up on your screen to keep up to date with all my content, and hit that like button down below. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon for as little as $1 a month for exclusive videos, early access content, and to get your name up on the screen. Thanks again for watching.